An eccentric millionaire decided to bury a police horse alive, and the entire world exploded in outrage. But no one imagined that behind this cruel act was a disturbing secret that divided the nation. Subscribe now to find out what he revealed. Afterward, the news began as a whisper in the corridors of power in Lexington, Kentucky, a city where horses weren't just animals, but living monuments to a tradition as old as the rolling bluegrass hills themselves. Maxwell Thornton, a tech billionaire with a reputation for unpredictable temperament and theatrical gestures, had purchased a retired police horse for an absurd sum from the Lexington Police Department's mounted unit, without disclosing any public intention about the animal's fate. "He paid how much?" Detective Sarah Coleman asked, nearly spitting out her coffee in the precinct break room. A 20-year veteran of the force, she had spent her early years working alongside the mounted unit and knew the value of a good police horse, but also knew what happened when they aged out of service. $300,000, replied Officer Mike Daniels, scrolling through his phone. "For old Thunder, says here Thornton just walked in, wrote a check, and had the horse transported to his estate the same day." Thunder had been a legend in his time. A magnificent Pachirian, crossed with a coal-black coat that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. For 12 years, he had served in crowd control during Kentucky Derby weekends, patrolled downtown during festivals, and participated in countless community outreach programs. Children would point, and adults would nod with respect when Thunder glip-clopped down Main Street, but time waits for no one, not even legendary police horses. At 17, Thunder's joints had begun to stiffen, and his once proud gait had slowed. The department had followed protocol. Thunder was to be auctioned off, with preference given to officers who had worked with him. Nobody expected an outsider, let alone Maxwell Thornton, to show any interest. The buzz around town intensified when, days later, Thornton gave an enigmatic press conference from the sprawling veranda of his 200-acre bluegrass estate, Thornfield. With Thunder standing majestically behind him, Thornton's words sent chills down the spines of everyone watching. "I will do something irreversible to prove a point about loyalty and redemption," he announced, his steel-gray eyes boring into the cameras. "This city celebrates its horses until they're no longer useful, then discards them like yesterday's racing forms. Thunder's story will change everything." He took no questions, simply turning on his custom-made boots and walking back into his mansion, leaving reporters shouting questions into the warm Kentucky air. Sarah couldn't shake the uneasiness that settled in her stomach after watching the press conference. She had known Thunder since he was first brought into the unit, a spirited 3-year-old with eyes that seemed to understand more than most humans she knew. "I don't like it, Mike," she said, pacing the break room floor. "Thornton's never shown interest in animal welfare before. Something doesn't add up." Mike shrugged. "The man's worth billions, probably just another rich guy's whim." But Sarah had built her detective career on intuition, and something about Thornton's cold smile and cryptic words triggered every alarm bell in her head. Without telling anyone at the precinct, she began digging into Thornton's background. Maxwell Thornton had made his fortune developing encryption software that major corporations and governments now used worldwide. He was notoriously private about his past, and the profiles written about him focused more on his eccentricities, his collection of rare mechanical watches, his habit of firing employees who wore certain colors on specific days of the week, his obsession with symmetry in all things. 3 days after the press conference, Sarah's cell phone rang as she was heading home. It was Ellie Parker, a former colleague who now worked security at Thornfield. "Sarah, you need to see this." Ellie's voice was tight with concern. "Thornton's been having workers dig a huge hole on the north end of the property. And there's something else. He's been spending hours alone with Thunder in the stables, talking to him like the horse understands every word." The next morning, Grainy drone footage appeared on social media, captured by a local news helicopter that had happened to fly over Thornfield. The images showed a deep excavation in progress and nearby, Thunder lying motionless on the ground, though clearly breathing. Within hours, the footage had gone viral, sparking outrage across the country. The hashtag #DuckSaveThunder began trending nationally. Animal rights activists gathered outside Thornfield's ornate gates, holding signs and chanting. Local officials attempted to intervene, but Thornton's legal team quickly produced paperwork showing his lawful ownership of Thunder. "Mr. Thornton is not breaking any laws," his attorney James Westbrook stated coldly to the press. "The horse is his property, and he retains full rights to do as he wishes." Sarah watched the chaos unfold on television, her detective's mind racing. Something about the timing of the drone footage felt staged, almost as if Thornton wanted the world to see. And why would a man who valued privacy suddenly allow a news helicopter to film his property? She called Ellie again. "I need to get inside Thornfield." "That's impossible," Ellie replied. "Security's been doubled since the protests started, but—" She paused. "There's a staff entrance on the east side. I could leave my keycard there. At 11 tonight." As darkness fell over Lexington that evening, the protests outside Thornfield had swelled. News vans lined the road, and police barricades kept the crowd at bay. Sarah parked her car a mile away and approached on foot through the neighboring property, a horse farm owned by an old friend who owed her a favor. The night air carried the sweet smell of Timothy hay and the distant sound of protesters. Sarah moved silently through the shadows until she reached the staff entrance, a simple gate in the tall stone wall surrounding Thornfield. As promised, Ellie's keycard was hidden under a rock nearby. Heart pounding, Sarah slipped inside, keeping to the shadows of the massive oak trees that dotted the property. She had studied the estate layout using satellite images online, and knew the stables were located behind the main house. As she approached, she noticed something odd. The lights were on, but there was no movement, no security guards patrolling. It felt too easy, almost as if— "Detective Coleman," came a smooth voice from behind her. "I've been expecting you." Sarah whirled around to find Maxwell Thornton standing there, dressed impeccably in riding boots and a tailored jacket despite the late hour. His silver hair caught the moonlight, and his expression was unreadable. "Mr. Thornton," she replied, straightening her shoulders. "I'm here about Thunder." "Of course you are," he said with a thin smile. "Everyone seems quite concerned about one horse, now that there's a spectacle. Where was this concern when the department sold off 20 other police horses to slaughterhouses over the past decade?" The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. "That's not true," she said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. She had transferred out of the mounted unit years ago. Could this have happened without her knowledge? "Follow me, detective," Thornton said, turning toward the stables. "There's something you should see." Against her better judgment, Sarah followed him into the brightly lit stable. But when they reached Thunder's supposed stall, she froze in confusion. The horse inside looked like Thunder, same size, same coal-black coat. But as it turned to face them, Sarah immediately knew this wasn't the horse she had known for years. The eyes were different. The distinctive white star on the forehead was slightly too large. "What is this?" she demanded. "Where's Thunder?" Thornton's face remained impassive. "This is what the public believes to be Thunder. A near-perfect double I acquired from a breeder in Virginia. The real question, Detective Coleman, is why you're the first person from the department who cared enough to come looking." Sarah stood motionless, her mind racing to process Thornton's words. The imposter horse nickered softly in its stall, oblivious to the tension filling the air. "You've staged all of this," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The press conference, the excavation, the conveniently timed drone footage. It was all deliberate." Thornton's thin lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Perceptive. That's why I've been watching your career, Detective Coleman. You actually care about the truth, not just appearances. Where is the real Thunder? Sarah demanded, taking a step toward him. Thornton checked his watch, one of his famous collection pieces worth more than Sarah's annual salary. Safe. That's all you need to know for now. He gestured toward a door at the end of the stable. My office is through there. I believe you'll find what you're looking for. Every instinct told Sarah this could be a trap, but her detective's curiosity overrode her caution. She walked past Thornton toward the office, her hand instinctively hovering near her concealed firearm. The office was surprisingly modest compared to the grandeur of Thornfield. A simple desk, bookshelves lining the walls, and a large corkboard, covered with photographs and documents. As Sarah approached the board, she felt her breath catch. Photos of police horses, dozens of them. Each image was labeled with a name, dates of service, and what appeared to be a final disposition. Looking closer, Sarah's stomach turned as she read the notes. Sold to Canadian meat processor, auctioned to unknown buyer, euthanized due to budget constraints. It's all documented, Thornton said from the doorway. Records the department tried to bury. I've spent 3 years tracking every retired police horse from this county. Why? Sarah asked, unable to tear her eyes away from the damning evidence. Sit down, detective. Thornton's voice softened slightly as he moved to a small refrigerator and retrieved 2 bottles of water, offering one to Sarah. Reluctantly, she sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk, accepting the water, but not drinking it. 15 years ago, I was nobody, Thornton began, remaining standing as he gazed out a window into the darkness. Just a programmer living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Louisville, coding 18 hours a day, trying to get my startup off the ground. He turned to face her. One day, I was in Lexington for a pitch meeting. It was Derby weekend, crowds. Everywhere, I got separated from my group, ended up in a nasty situation with some drunk tourists. That's when I met Sergeant Walker and his horse, Monarch. Sarah's eyes widened at the mention. Sergeant Tom Walker had been her mentor when she first joined the force. Walker and Monarch saved me from a bad beating, maybe worse. When Walker learned I was walking back to my budget motel because I couldn't afford a cab, he actually let me ride behind him on Monarch. Said the horse wouldn't mind carrying someone who was down on their luck. Thornton's expression softened, showing genuine emotion for the first time. That ride changed my life, detective. The kindness of Walker, the dignity of that animal. It made me believe in myself again. I went back to Louisville, worked harder than ever, and 6 months later sold my encryption algorithm for $8 million. He sat down behind the desk. I tried to find Walker and Monarch years later, after I'd made my first billion. Wanted to thank them, maybe make a donation to the mounted unit. That's when I discovered the truth about what happens to these animals. After their service, Sarah set her water bottle down, untouched. If what you're showing me is true, why not go public? File a complaint with Internal Affairs, make a legitimate donation to create a retirement program? Thornton's laugh was bitter. I tried, detective, for 2 years. Made calls, sent letters, offered to build and fund a retirement sanctuary. The department gave me the runaround. Politicians smiled and promised to look into it. Animal welfare organizations said they had bigger priorities. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. No one cares about an unsexy cause until there's drama. No one notices injustice until there's spectacle, so I decided to create one. Sarah looked back at the board of photos, her mind connecting the pieces. Monarch. He's in these photos, isn't he? Thornton nodded, standing to point at a photo of a chestnut horse with a distinctive white blaze. Sold to a meat processor in Mexico 6 years ago, after 15 years of service to the city. Walker wasn't even notified. He thought Monarch had gone to a good home. Sarah felt sick. Tom Walker had retired 5 years ago and moved to Florida. Had he ever learned the truth about his partner? What's your endgame here, Thornton? You can't seriously be planning to... She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence, to verbalize the grotesque scenario the public feared. Bury a horse alive? Thornton supplied calmly. Of course not. But I needed everyone to believe I might. Needed to create enough outrage that no one could look away. He stood and walked to a filing cabinet, removing a thick folder. This contains documentation of every retired police horse from Lexington and 3 surrounding counties over the past 20 years. Their treatment, their final destinations. I've had investigators working on this for years. He placed the folder on the desk in front of Sarah. In 3 days, I'm holding another press conference. I'll reveal that Thunder is safe, that he's been at my private equine sanctuary in Montana this whole time. I'll expose the department's treatment of retired service animals and announce the creation of a $50 million foundation to create retirement programs for police horses nationwide. Sarah stared at him, trying to reconcile the cold, calculating billionaire from the press conference with the passionate advocate sitting before her. And the fake Thunder? The excavation? She asked. Props in a necessary performance, he replied, without a hint of remorse. The public's outrage has already accomplished what years of my polite requests couldn't. The mayor called an emergency meeting about police horse retirement policies this morning. 3. State representatives have pledged to introduce legislation. Sometimes, Detective Coleman, you need to become the villain to create real change. Sarah thumbed through the folder, seeing faces of horses she had known years ago, learning their fates for the first time. The evidence was meticulously gathered. Transportation records, auction receipts, testimony from former handlers. Why show me this? She finally asked. Why let me in on your plan? Thornton's expression became unreadable again. Because you knew Thunder. You cared enough to break into my property to find him. I need someone inside the department who understands what's at stake. Someone who can help ensure that when the truth comes out, the focus stays on the horses, not on my methods. Sarah stood up abruptly. You're manipulating me, just like you're manipulating public opinion. I prefer to think of it as recruiting an ally with shared values, he countered smoothly. Take the folder, detective. Verify everything yourself. Then decide where you stand. As Sarah hesitantly took the folder, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mike. Where are you? Protests getting intense at Thornfield. Captain wants all hands on deck. Your colleagues await, Thornton observed. The staff exit will take you back to where you entered. No one will see you leave. Sarah clutched the folder to her chest, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. I don't know what game you're playing, Thornton, but if anything happens to Thunder, the real Thunder, I'll make it my personal mission to bring you down. His smile was enigmatic. I wouldn't expect anything less, detective. Outside, the night had grown cooler, and Sarah could hear the chants of protesters growing louder near the main gate. As she slipped back through the staff entrance, she glanced back at Thornfield's imposing silhouette against the star-filled Kentucky sky, wondering if she had just made a deal with the devil or found an unlikely ally in a cause she hadn't known she needed to fight for. Back at her apartment, Sarah spread the contents of Thornton's folder across her dining table. Document after document confirmed his claims. Receipts from slaughterhouses, transport manifests with police department seals, emails discussing the disposal of aging horses as if they were worn-out equipment rather than living beings who had served faithfully. She found the file on Monarch and felt tears sting her eyes as she read the clinical description of his final journey. Tom Walker had been like a father to her in those early years on the force. How would he react if he knew the truth? As dawn broke over Lexington, Sarah had made her decision. She carefully replaced everything in the folder and reached for her phone. The number Thornton had slipped into her jacket pocket gleamed on a crisp business card. "I need to see him," she told the efficient-sounding woman who answered. "The real Thunder." There was a pause, then, "Mr. Thornton anticipated your call, Detective Coleman. A private plane is waiting at Bluegrass Airport. The pilot has been instructed to depart as soon as you arrive." 4 hours later, Sarah stood in a vast Montana meadow, watching in amazement as Thunder, the real Thunder, galloped across open grassland alongside a dozen other retired police horses. His coat gleamed in the mountain sunlight, his movement fluid and free in a way she had never seen during his years of service. "He remembers you," said Thornton, appearing beside her at the fence line. He was dressed differently here: jeans, boots, a simple flannel shirt, looking more like a ranch hand than a tech billionaire. Thunder had indeed changed direction, trotting toward them with ears pricked forward in recognition. "This place," Sarah gestured at the stunning 1,000-acre sanctuary nestled in a mountain valley. "This was your plan all along." "Phase 1, Thornton replied as Thunder reached the fence and gently nuzzled Sarah's outstretched hand. "The sanctuary exists, but policy change is needed to ensure every service animal has this opportunity. That's where the spectacle comes in." Back in Lexington 2 days later, Sarah walked into the police department with a strange mix of emotions churning inside her. The folder from Thornton was locked in her apartment safe, but its contents were seared into her memory. Every officer she passed in the hallway now triggered a question in her mind. Did they know? Were they complicit? Or just ignorant like she had been? The precinct was buzzing with activity, most of it centered around the Thornton situation. The protests outside Thornfield had grown to include celebrities and politicians, all eager to be seen supporting the cause of the moment. Save Thunder had evolved into a national movement overnight, with social media users changing their profile pictures to black horses in solidarity. "Coleman!" Captain Richards called from his office doorway. "Where the hell have you been? I called you in yesterday for the Thornfield situation." "Family emergency," Sarah lied smoothly, stepping into his office. "My sister in Louisville. Everything's under control now." Richards studied her face for a moment before nodding. "Well, you're here now. I'm putting you on the Thornton task force. We need to find a legal way to get that horse out of there before this circus gets any worse." Sarah kept her expression neutral, even as her stomach twisted with the knowledge of what was really happening. "Has there been any confirmation that Thornton actually intends to harm the animal?" Richards frowned. "The man bought a horse, dug a hole, and announced he's going to do something irreversible. What more do you need? The mayor's office is getting thousands of calls an hour. The governor just issued a statement. We need to resolve this, fast." "And if we discover that Thornton hasn't broken any laws?" Sarah pressed. Richards slammed a hand on his desk. "Find a law he's broken, Coleman. Animal cruelty, disturbing the peace, improperly filled out paperwork when he bought the damn horse. I don't care what it is, just get me something I can use to shut this down." As Sarah left the captain's office, she spotted Mike Daniels at his desk, scrolling through social media coverage of the protests. "You okay?" he asked as she approached. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," she replied, glancing at his computer screen. "Anything new on Thornton?" Mike shook his head. "Guys locked up tight in that mansion of his. Won't talk to anyone, not even through his lawyers anymore. But check this out. Someone leaked personnel files from the mounted unit going back 15 years. He turned his screen toward her. Sarah felt her breath catch. The documents were from Thornton's folder, but she hadn't leaked them, which meant Thornton was proceeding with his plan, dripping information strategically to keep the story alive. These show that over 30 police horses were sold to meat processors after retirement, Mike continued, his voice tight with anger, including Ranger. Remember him, the horse that took a knife for Officer Kelly during that riot in 2014. They sold him for slaughter 3 years later when his arthritis got bad. Sarah nodded silently, watching the pieces of Thornton's game falling into place. Public outrage was shifting, no longer solely focused on the eccentric billionaire, but now turning toward the department itself. "I need to talk to someone from the mounted unit," she said abruptly. "Someone who's been there a long time. Someone who might know the truth." "Try Wilcox," Mike suggested. "Frank Wilcox. Been with the mounted unit over 20 years. If anyone knows where all the bodies are buried, it's him." Sarah found Sergeant Frank Wilcox at the stables behind the department's mounted unit headquarters. A stocky man with weathered features and hands gnarled from decades of physical work. He was brushing down a young chestnut mare when Sarah approached. "Detective Coleman," he acknowledged without looking up from his work. "Figured someone would come asking questions eventually. Just didn't think it'd be you." Sarah leaned against the stable door. "Then you know why I'm here." Wilcox set down the brush and turned to face her, his expression a complex mixture of resignation and relief. "Those files that got leaked, they're real, every last one of them." "Why, Frank?" Sarah asked quietly. "These animals served the department, protected officers. How could they be discarded like that?" Wilcox's laugh was hollow. "You think I wanted it that way? For years I begged for a retirement program, wrote proposals, found farms willing to take the horses for reasonable fees. Nobody cared. Not in the budget, they said. Find the most cost-effective solution." He walked past Sarah out of the stall, gesturing for her to follow him to a small office at the end of the stable. Inside, he unlocked a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick binder. "Here," he said, dropping it on the desk between them. "My personal records of every horse that came through this unit in my time, where they came from, their service record, and where they went after. I've kept my own copies of everything. Figured someday someone might care enough to ask." Sarah opened the binder, seeing page after page of meticulous notes, photographs, and official documents, a mirror image of Thornton's collection, but compiled from inside the system by someone who had clearly cared deeply about these animals. "You knew Thornton was telling the truth," she said, looking up at Wilcox. He nodded, sinking heavily into his chair. "When he started asking questions 3 years ago, I thought finally someone with resources was going to help. I gave him copies of everything, told him who to talk to. But then nothing happened. The bureaucracy swallowed his efforts just like it swallowed mine." "And Thunder?" Sarah asked. "Did you know about Thornton's plan for him?" Wilcox's eyes widened slightly. "I know he bought Thunder for an insane amount. Beyond that," he studied her face carefully, "you know something." Sarah chose her next words carefully. "I believe Thornton has a larger agenda than people realize. One that might actually help ensure no more police horses end up in slaughterhouses." Wilcox leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's a press conference scheduled tomorrow. Word is, Thornton's finally going to reveal what he plans to do with Thunder. Half the department thinks he's going to execute the poor beast on live television to make his point." "And what do you think?" Sarah asked. A ghost of a smile crossed Wilcox's weathered face. "I think Maxwell Thornton didn't get to be a billionaire by being stupid or predictable. Whatever he's planning, it'll be calculated for maximum impact." He paused, studying her. "And I think you already know what it is." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but she immediately knew who it was from. "Plans have accelerated. Press conference moved to 5 p.m. today. Your presence would be valuable. Empty." She looked up at Wilcox. "I need to go, but this conversation isn't over." As she turned to leave, Wilcox called after her, "Coleman, whatever happens, remember that some of us tried to do right by these animals. Not everyone looked the other way." The crowd outside Thornfield had swelled to thousands by the time Sarah arrived. Police barricades struggled to contain the mass of protesters, news crews, and curiosity seekers. She flashed her badge several times to make her way through, finally reaching the front gates where a security team in dark suits was checking credentials. "Detective Sarah Coleman," she announced to a stern-faced woman with an earpiece. "I believe Mr. Thornton is expecting me." The woman checked a tablet, then nodded curtly. "Follow me, detective." Inside the estate grounds, the atmosphere was surprisingly calm, an island of order in a sea of chaos. Sarah was led not to the main house, but to a large media tent that had been erected on the lawn. Inside, technicians were setting up cameras and lighting, while Thornton's staff arranged chairs in neat rows. "Detective," Thornton greeted her, appearing from a side entrance. Today, he wore a somber charcoal suit that seemed chosen to project serious intentions. "Thank you for coming. I've saved you a seat in the front row." "What's going on, Thornton?" Sarah demanded quietly. "Why move up the timeline?" His expression remained impassive, but she caught a flicker of something, concern, anxiety, in his eyes. "A complication has arisen. Someone else knows about Thunder's true location. I need to control the narrative before it spins beyond my ability to manage it." Before she could press him further, his attention was diverted by his chief of staff, and Sarah found herself being ushered to her seat. Within minutes, the tent began filling with carefully selected media representatives, local officials, and what appeared to be animal rights advocates from various organizations. At precisely 5 p.m., Thornton stepped onto the small stage that had been prepared. Behind him was a large screen, currently dark. The tent fell silent as he approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and measured, "thank you for coming. Over the past week, there has been significant speculation about my intentions regarding a retired police horse named Thunder, which I purchased from the Lexington Police Department." He paused, surveying the room. "Many have condemned me, threatened me, even suggested I plan to harm this animal to make some obscure point. Today, I want to set the record straight." With a nod to a technician, the screen behind him illuminated, showing a split-screen image. On one side, the imposter Thunder in his stall at Thornfield. On the other, live video feed of the real Thunder galloping across a sunlit Montana meadow. A murmur of confusion rippled through the audience. "What you're seeing," Thornton continued, "is the truth. The horse that has been at Thornfield this past week is not Thunder, but a similar animal I acquired to serve as a stand-in. The real Thunder has been living at my private equine sanctuary in Montana since the day after I purchased him." The murmurs grew louder as reporters began shouting questions. Thornton raised a hand for silence. "My intention was never to harm any animal. My intention was to force a long-overdue public conversation about how we treat the animals that serve our communities after they are no longer useful to us." With another nod, the screen changed to show documents, the same ones Sarah had seen in his folder, now displayed for the world to see. "For the past 15 years, Thornton's voice grew harder, the Lexington Police Department, along with many others across this country, has been selling their retired police horses to slaughterhouses and meat processors, primarily in Canada and Mexico. Animals that served faithfully for a decade or more, protecting officers and citizens alike, discarded for a few $100s when they became too old or injured to continue working." The tent erupted in shocked exclamations and the furious scribbling of notes. Cameras flashed incessantly as reporters captured the documents displayed on screen. Thornton stood unflinching under the storm of shouted questions and camera flashes, his expression resolute as the screen behind him continued to cycle through damning evidence. Sarah watched from her front row seat, witnessing the careful unraveling of his masterfully orchestrated plan. For all his calculated manipulation, she couldn't deny the truth in his message or the necessity of his methods. "I tried the conventional approach first," Thornton continued when the initial furor had somewhat subsided. For 3 years, I attempted to work within the system, offered to fund retirement programs, build sanctuaries, create endowments. I was ignored, deflected, patronized by the very institutions charged with public trust. He gestured to the screen, now showing emails between department officials discussing the disposal problem of aging horses. So yes, I created a spectacle. I made you believe I might do something terrible because that was the only way to make you care. And it worked, he said, his voice rising with controlled passion. In 1 week, you've shown more concern for one horse you thought was in danger than for the hundreds that have actually suffered and perished after faithful service. From the back of the tent, a voice shouted, "You manipulated us." Thornton nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I did. And I would do it again, because now you're listening." He stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage, surveying the crowd with an intensity that silenced even the most vocal critics. "Today, I am announcing the establishment of the Service Animal Dignity Foundation, with an initial endowment of $100 million, twice what I had originally planned," he announced, causing another ripple of astonishment. "This foundation will establish retirement sanctuaries in every region of the country for police, horses, military working dogs, and other service animals who have given their lives to protect ours." The mood in the tent was shifting now, from shock and outrage to something more complex. Sarah could feel it in the air, the reluctant recognition that despite his methods, Thornton's cause was just. "Additionally," he continued, "I am releasing to every major news outlet a complete dossier documenting the systematic mistreatment of retired service animals across 50 police departments nationwide. This information has been independently verified and will withstand any scrutiny." He paused, allowing the gravity of this threat to sink in. "I expect significant policy changes to follow, or the next phase of revelations will include the names of every official who knew and did nothing." Sarah felt a chill at the calculated nature of his strategy. Thornton hadn't just been collecting information on horses, he'd been gathering leverage against those responsible. "Mr. Thornton," called a reporter from the Lexington Herald-Leader, "are you prepared for potential legal consequences for your deception? You caused nationwide panic and diverted significant public resources." Thornton's smile was cold. "I've broken no laws. I purchased a horse legally. I transported it to my property legally. I employed an actor, in this case another horse, to make a point. If authorities wish to pursue legal action against me for these activities, I welcome the additional publicity it would bring to this cause." His confidence was formidable, and Sarah knew he was right. His team of lawyers would have ensured he remained just within the bounds of legality, even as he manipulated public sentiment masterfully. As the press conference continued, Sarah's phone buzzed with messages from Captain Richards, demanding to know if she was at Thornfield and what was happening. She ignored them all, her attention fixed on the unfolding drama before her. Near the end of the hour, Thornton addressed the room once more. "There's someone here today who deserves recognition, someone who cared enough to investigate when others were content to merely speculate and condemn. Detective Sarah Coleman of the Lexington Police Department." Sarah froze as all eyes and cameras turned toward her. "Detective Coleman didn't just protest or post hashtags," Thornton continued. "She actually took action. She investigated, she questioned, she demanded the truth, the kind of engagement we should expect from all our public servants. She discovered the real Thunder's location and verified his well-being herself." Sarah stood reluctantly, feeling the heat of dozens of cameras turning toward her. This wasn't part of any plan she had agreed to, yet as uncomfortable as the spotlight made her, she couldn't deny the truth of Thornton's words or the importance of the cause. "Detective," a reporter called out, "did you know about Mr. Thornton's deception? Were you complicit?" Before she could respond, Thornton smoothly interjected. Detective Coleman became aware of the situation only after conducting her own independent investigation. Her concern was always for Thunder's welfare, not for public relations or damage control. Sarah looked directly at Thornton, recognizing his strategic move. He was offering her protection, positioning her as a hero rather than a potential accomplice, while simultaneously putting her in a position where she would have to either publicly support his cause or contradict him and damage her own credibility. She stepped forward to the microphone. "My investigation confirmed that Thunder is safe and well cared for," she said carefully. "And it also uncovered disturbing evidence supporting Mr. Thornton's claims about the treatment of retired police horses. As an officer sworn to protect, I find these revelations deeply troubling." The press conference ended shortly after, with Thornton announcing that the stand-in Thunder would be transported to the Montana sanctuary the following day, and extending an open invitation to media representatives to visit and verify the conditions there. As the tent emptied, Sarah found herself face to face with Thornton in a momentarily private corner. "You set me up," she said quietly. "You made me part of your spectacle without my consent." His expression was unapologetic. "I gave you a platform. What you did with it was your choice, detective. You chose the truth. The department will crucify me for this." "Perhaps," he acknowledged. "Or perhaps you'll become the catalyst for real change within the system. Officer Wilcox has already agreed to serve as the head of equine welfare for the Foundation. I'd like you to consider joining our board of directors as well." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by his chief of staff, informing him that the governor was on the line, demanding to speak with him immediately. "Duty calls," Thornton said, with the hint of a genuine smile. "We'll continue this conversation soon." By evening, the story had exploded across national media. The department held an emergency press conference where the commissioner promised a full investigation into the allegations while simultaneously attempting to distance current leadership from the documented practices. Sarah's phone rang incessantly. Calls from colleagues, reporters, and eventually Captain Richards himself, ordering her to report to his office immediately. The precinct was in chaos when she arrived, with officers huddled in tense discussions, and televisions in the break room tuned to news coverage of the scandal. Outside, a small group of protesters had already gathered, demanding accountability. Richard's face was purple with barely contained rage as she entered his office. "What the hell were you thinking, Coleman? Appearing at that circus, lending credibility to that maniac's accusations?" "They aren't accusations, Captain. They're facts," Sarah replied steadily, placing Wilcox's binder on his desk. "And I wasn't the only one who knew. Officer Wilcox has been documenting this for years." Richard stared at the binder as if it might bite him. "You're suspended, effective immediately, pending investigation into your conduct and potential collusion with Thornton." Sarah had expected this. "I understand, sir. I'll surrender my badge and weapon to the duty sergeant." As she turned to leave, Richards called after her. "For God's sake, Coleman, why? Why throw away your career for some horses?" She paused at the door. "Because they served this department faithfully. They deserved better from us, and so does the public." The following weeks saw a whirlwind of developments. Sarah's suspension became national news, turning her into an unexpected symbol of integrity within law enforcement. Thousands signed petitions demanding her reinstatement. Fellow officers began coming forward with their own stories of attempting to secure better outcomes for retired service animals, only to be stymied by bureaucracy and budget constraints. The mayor, sensing the shifting political winds, established an independent commission to investigate the department's practices and recommend reforms. The police commissioner resigned, citing health concerns. Several other high-ranking officials took early retirement. Through it all, Thornton's media strategy continued to unfold with precision. The Montana sanctuary became a sensation, with carefully selected journalists invited to tour the facilities and meet the real Thunder, whose story had captured the public's imagination. Celebrities pledged support to the Service Animal Dignity Foundation. State legislators in Kentucky and beyond began drafting laws to ensure humane retirement for service animals. 1 month after the press conference, Sarah sat on the porch of her small Lexington home, watching the sunset and contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. Her suspension was still in effect, though public pressure was mounting for her reinstatement. Multiple police departments in other states had quietly reached out with job offers, and Thornton's foundation continued to court her for a leadership role. A sleek black car pulled up to her curb, one of Thornton's, she recognized, but it wasn't the billionaire who emerged. It was Tom Walker, her old mentor, looking older than she remembered but with the same steady presence that had guided her early career. "Sergeant Walker," she said in surprise, standing to greet him. "Just Tom now," he replied with a tired smile, climbing the steps to her porch. "Been retired 5 years. May I join you?" They sat in companionable silence for a moment before he spoke again. "Got a call from Thornton last week. Told me about Monarch. Flew me out to see his sanctuary." His voice grew rough with emotion. "They have a memorial there, you know, for all the horses they couldn't save. Monarch's name is first on the wall." Sarah nodded, unable to find adequate words. "He also told me what you did," Walker continued. "Standing up, risking your career. Reminded me of a rookie detective I once knew, too stubborn to look the other way when something wasn't right." "I learned from the best," Sarah replied softly. Walker reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Thornton asked me to give you this, said it was better coming from me than another of his messengers." Sarah took the envelope warily. Inside was a simple letter offering her the position of executive director for the Service Animal Dignity Foundation, with a salary that made her eyes widen and complete autonomy to shape the organization's investigative and advocacy work. "He says you're the perfect person to lead this fight," Walker explained. "Someone who understands both sides, the department's constraints and the moral imperative. For what it's worth, I agree with him." Sarah stared at the letter, conflicted. "Taking this would mean admitting my police career is over," Walker shook his head. "No, it means recognizing that sometimes protecting and serving takes different forms. You'd be doing more good for more departments this way than you ever could with a badge." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across her small yard, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. When she'd first encountered Thornton, she'd seen him as a potential villain, then as a manipulative ally. Now she understood something deeper. They were both, in their own ways, trying to right a wrong that others had been content to ignore. "Tell Thornton I'll consider it," she said finally, "but I have conditions." Walker chuckled. He said, "You'd say exactly that. There's a plane waiting at the airport whenever you're ready to discuss those conditions in person." 3 months later, Sarah stood at the fence of the Montana sanctuary, watching Thunder and a dozen other retired police, horses grazing peacefully in the shadow of the mountains. The foundation had already established 3 more sanctuaries across the country, with plans for 5 more within the year. The Kentucky state legislature had passed the Thunder's Law, requiring humane retirement for all service animals. Similar bills were pending in 11 other states. "Was it worth it?" asked Thornton, joining her at the fence. Their working relationship had evolved into something resembling mutual respect, if not quite friendship. "All the deception, manipulation, the chaos we created." Sarah considered the question. In the end, Thornton's methods had been ethically questionable, but undeniably effective. The spectacle had accomplished in weeks what years of proper channels and polite requests had failed to achieve. "The ends don't justify the means," she said finally. But sometimes the means are all you have when the system fails those it's supposed to protect. Thornton nodded thoughtfully. A diplomatic answer from the woman who now controls my $100 million foundation. She smiled slightly. Not diplomatic, honest. What you did was wrong in many ways. It was also necessary. Both things can be true. In the field, Thunder raised his head and trotted toward them, recognizing his visitors. As he reached the fence, Sarah stroked his muzzle gently, remembering the day she'd first seen him as a young police horse, proud, strong, committed to service. He deserved better than what the system had planned for him, she said softly. They all did. And now, they'll have it, Thornton replied, because sometimes it takes a villain to change the story. As Thunder nickered softly against her hand, Sarah realized that in this strange tale of manipulation and revelation, of spectacle and substance, there were no true villains or heroes, only people making difficult choices for what they believed was right. And in the end, that was perhaps the most honest form of service any of them could offer. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Sarah and Thunder has moved you. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the unexpected ways justice can be served. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments.